looking forward to being able to share just a little bit of my thoughts and my ideas around how within housing associations or organizations that look after housings or within local authorities, we need to think about biodiversity and again. And I guess I'll give you my starting point on this is that I believe in looking after our environment. It's a really special thing for me. So I'm very much coming out from this of going, actually, I believe that we look after our environment. That will make a huge difference to climate change. That will make a huge difference to people's lives and quality of lives and experiences they have in life. And it makes communities. So I'm really passionate believer in that. That's my my starting point on this. And as we go forward with this, you'll very much probably hear that in me. And I don't apologize for it because that's what I believe is important, is that we're doing this to make sure that we've got a future to live in, and it's a nice future with nice places, and we're supporting people's mental health by being able to get outdoors and into nice spaces. That right to see a tree, that right to see sky, right to see, to be able to walk on grass, etc., etc. For me, those are just basic human rights. So yeah, that's where I'll be coming from, and hopefully it's of interest to you guys, and hopefully a bit of this will rub off and impact on what you guys are doing in your places of work, etc. So yeah, looking forward to sharing that with you. So we'll crack on and sort of move through these slides. So biodiversity net gain. So we'll be going through understanding what it is, how it's measured, what we need to do to achieve that biodiversity net gain. And you'll hear within this, we'll talk about a 10%. And as you're probably not surprised now, I'll be going, what more can you do? 10% is the minimum. What more can you do? Can you do 20%? Can you do 30%? What can you achieve? How much biodiversity net gain can we achieve in our developments and in our work? So then, and once we've got that understanding about biodiversity net gain, we'll go, well, what's that mean for housing? What does that mean for you as housing associations or local authorities or organisations that are involved in housing? And then hopefully we'll sort of sum that up and just sort of some of the other RISE resources are available. And some of the other training and stuff that's going on in the next couple of weeks that hopefully might be of interest to you guys. So yeah, lots going on in the industry at the moment, lots going on in the sector. So an opportunity to find out what else other opportunities for learning there are. So within all this, if anybody on the call is a biodiversity net gain expert, we're going to be coming at this at a very low level, but just really sort of basic level of understanding. So apologize if anyone's coming for like a sort of doctoral thesis. That's not from me, I'm afraid, today. So yeah, but if anybody's got any questions, anybody's got anything that they want to talk about as they go along, put it in the chat and we'll come to it at the end. So what is biodiversity net gain? Creating and improving biodiversity, making our world a better place, helping nature, wildlife, green spaces, etc. And as I've said, why we're doing it, yeah, I didn't say that again, do I? So there is now a statutory line on biodiversity net gain, and that is come through. And so from I'll talk to this a little bit more, but from April 2024, it was there. You had to achieve this 10% biodiversity net gain in all new developments, in all our growth and development of sites. So it's become there, and it's a statutory thing now that we have to be achieving. So really exciting, really, really positive if we're going to be tackling net zero, tackling this change of our environment. So, as I just said, it affected all sites from the 2nd of April 2024. Any sort of large national infrastructure projects will be from late November 2025. So there is a slight gap in this. But as we're talking about this in a housing perspective, predominantly, from 2024, there is an opportunity for you to sell into the BNG market. So, for housing associations, and if you've got a large area of land, there is a potential income in this for you. So we'll talk about that later as well. And as you thinking about your land, etc., if there's biodiversity net gain has been done on that land, there are conditions and there's timescales that you have to manage and kind of control. So kind of making sure people are aware of those kind of things. So we'll come on to that. So, and that's the elements for housing associations. So are there any exemptions? There's always exemptions in life, isn't there? So a development site that doesn't impact a priority habitat and impacts less than 25 square meters on site habitat. So if you've got a priority habitat, so I think I mentioned, I'm up here in Cumbria. We have designated priority habitats across the Lake District here. So really, really important that you are aware of that. And you'll probably need to do this biodiversity net gain, whatever you're doing, if you're in that kind of site. If you're talking about a brownfield site, a small brownfield site in the middle of the city, then you're probably talking differently, aren't you? So yeah, it's understanding your site, understanding where you are and what you are kind of responsible for as you're doing this. You can see some other exemptions there, but they're very unlikely to kind of impact you guys as housing associations or local kind of small housing type delivery. So apologize for my cough. I'm still trying to get over this flu bug that's going around. So if we are responsible for a 10% increase in biodiversity net gain, we need to understand how we measure it and how we achieve that 10%. So BNG is kind of how short for most people refer to it. So there's a standardized biodiversity unit, and your site that you have, so you've got a 10-acre site. Before you do any work on that, you do the work on that 10-acre site, find out how many of these standardized biodiversity units you have, so that you kind of go, okay, that's great. We know that before we do any work on it, we've got 10 BNG units. And then, obviously, if you're going to achieve your 10% net gain, by the time you finish that site, and you put all the houses on it, and et cetera, the score needs to be 11. So you've got that 10% gain. I'm really hoping my maths was right there. I was doing that quickly in my head. I'm sure it was. So you're taking that, initial assessment, and you're working out how you're going to get the 10% or more net gain on that. So the stuff that will impact that is how big the site is. So, that's a fairly obvious one, isn't it? How special is that site? So I've just talked about priority habitats, but actually, what kind of land is there? So if you're talking about ancient woodlands, you're in a very different place to if you're talking about a brownfield site. If you're talking about just like farmland, which is just kind of currently grazed land, you're talking very, very different to a beautiful wildflower meadow, etc. So understanding the quality of the site, how special it is, understanding if there's any sort of preservation orders on it or anything like that, because that could just be a non-starter. So sort of looking at it and going, okay, there's a sort of preservation orders on there that will stop us. Where in the country are you? So the location of the site, etc. And what's already there, as we've already talked about. But understanding the site, there is a job here for taking your greenland sites, your outdoor spaces, and going, right, we need to understand it. We need to understand what's there, how important it is, etc. Lots of different tools for doing that, and it's really interesting. If you read the guidance, and there is some really good guidance on this online around the government website, etc. So there is some really good stuff there. Have a read of it. You can do some of this for small sites without any form of ecological background or knowledge or kind of experience, as long as you can prove that you can do the job properly. But that's not, that's going to be difficult. So there are ecologists that will come out and do it. There are AI map-based systems that will do this for you, etc. But your best starting point is just to talk to the people who know the space, who know the land, what's there, etc. So as you're thinking about any sites that you're going to be working on, is just talk to locals to start with, and then you can work out what's the best tool for doing this. So is it one of these sort of AI map-based systems that will kind of come in and do it? Or actually, is it going and talking to the local wildlife trust or local kind of conservation groups, etc., because they'll know the sites really well as well. Having worked for the National Trust in the Lake District, they know their sites exceptionally well. They have exceptional local knowledge, so they can actually have a much more open discussion with you about those kind of things. So, I've just kind of put on a local development that's happening, and as I've kind of, you're aware that I'm in Cumbria, so there's no hiding this now. So this is part of the Lake District National Park. So it's a new housing development. The new housing development's the area in green, and this is on the outskirts of Windermere. So you're already kind of going, okay, National Park, Windermere, so World Heritage Site, high tourist footprint, high passion for the Lake District. Okay, so you kind of go, that's quite a challenging site to think about then. And you're looking at doing a housing area, looking at doing some kind of business units, developing the train station, etc. So as you're starting to think about biodiversity net gain for this, you kind of go, actually, this is going to be quite a challenging site because of where you are in the country, national park, World Heritage Site, etc. But also the significance of that land, the importance of that land, the kind of the type of land that's there. You can see there is some wooded areas within that, so that'll be significant, etc. So as you're starting to think about that, kind of going, actually, it's going to be a really high score you're going to get on that. As soon as you're doing your pre-works and biodiversity assessment, you kind of go, it's actually going to be a big score. You're kind of already planning this out and kind of go, okay, that's going to be quite a challenging site to achieve the 10% on, or some of the other options that are out there. But also, it's, you know, it's very significant, etc. So it is going to score highly. If we took the same size of land and same size of area, and we plonked it into the middle of Birmingham, one of the old, you know, canal sites, etc., it would be scoring very differently. And we could, you know, the starting point's already very different. Kind of going, okay, it's a different place, different importance, different resource, you know, different biodiversity already there, etc., etc., etc. So, yeah, it's really interesting. And as you're thinking about your sites and any developments that are going on, just think about where they are, etc. It's just a really, really good starting point, because it might just go, actually, this just fits in the too hard for now box, and we'll just leave that and we'll go and work somewhere easier. We'll go and work somewhere that we know will be an easier win for us. You know, that I know that goes against my, you know, we want more biodiversity, but from you guys as operators, you kind of go, well, actually, this is an easy win for us, or this is a hard win. So you've kind of gone in and you've done that assessment of site. So once you've done that, you need to think about what your plan is. How are you going to put in? So if you've got this 10-acre site, like I normally mentioned earlier, that scores 10 biodiversity net gain, it scores 10 on the assessment criteria, and you need to get to 11. You need to think about a plan for how you're going to achieve that, because obviously you're going to take biodiversity out by putting homes in and roads in and access roads, etc., etc. So how are you going to get that 10% extra? How will you do that? So you can either do that on site, so you increase the biodiversity. So you think about how you are landscaping that site. So it might be that, you know, there's an opportunity to corner part of it off for a woodland. There might be an opportunity to create a meadow, increase the number of hedges there, develop all this. And this is where it's really important to say is this is outside of a curtilage. So this is not in people's gardens, because there's a really key thing with this is that you have to control and manage these sites. So if it's in somebody's garden, you can't do that. So you can't maintain this biodiversity net gain. So this is outside of people's gardens. So you might be thinking about, okay, well, we can have some hedges between us and the neighbours. We can have an area there that's planted for wildlife as part of the sud system that we'll have for water drainage. We'll create a wetland area, or a, you know, drainage area for water, and that'll be planted as well. So it's where you can link it into other pieces of work that you're already going to be doing, and actually just making it, and then thinking about how it's there for people. A long time ago, I was involved in developing water sports, and was going to schools, and they were saying, right, we're going to develop this site here, and we're going to fence off all the water, and we're not going to let anyone near any of that activity or any of that water, because there was a risk management perspective there. But actually that biodiversity there was not then available for people. So they were creating a biodiversity area, not intentionally, but actually they were not letting people access it, not letting people get in there. So it was a real kind of shame for that community who was going to be in and around that school. So yeah, so biodiversity on site. The next option is, if you can't do it on the site that you're on, if there's restraints or restrictions, or you can't achieve it, is there another site where you can go to of similar kind of biodiversity where you can put a 10% gain on? So it might be that you own one site on one side of a village, and you're developing homes on the other side of the village, and you can't achieve that 10% gain on that side of the village, but you've got this plot of land on the other side of the village. You develop that other plot of land, and you do some biodiversity work there, and you do some nice stuff, and it's, you know, it balances out. It kind of there. Or this is where you have an opportunity to kind of go, okay, we don't have a plot of land on the other side of the village, but that farmer does. Can we talk to that farmer and go, okay, we want to achieve 10% biodiversity net gain. We think we can do that by sticking these 3 hedges into your farmland. Can we buy that from you? Can we buy this opportunity to sort of create these biodiversity units on your land, and then you'll manage that for us? So you can off-site this. So, they're probably your most common type methods. You can buy biodiversity net gain units from the government. And I've put the current prices in there of 42,000 to 650,000 pounds per unit. So, if you are, if Elon Musk leaves America and comes to live in the Lake District, and he wants to create an amazing plot of land, amazing house on the shores of Windermere, he's probably paying 650,000 pounds per unit to develop that land on that kind of site. So, it's out there. If you've got the money, I'm sure you can spend it on getting what you want. I would personally kind of challenge back and go, do you really want to do that to that really, really important site? So if that money if you do go down that with the government, they invest those into habitat projects. If you are doing either of the first two, that creation or enhancement of the habitats is done, and those sites need to be maintained at that net gain for 30 years. That's one of the reasons why it can't be within curtilage. So, we've got no control. If you sell a house, you don't know what the resident's going to do in that house for the next 30 years, whereas land that you are controlling and managing. And this is where it then starts moving definitely into what does this mean for us as housing associations, or us as landlords, etc. If we have to maintain something for 30 years, we need to know and understand that, and we need to understand how that impacts on our groundworks and our grounds maintenance contracts, etc., etc. So we'll come on to that. So it's really, really interesting kind of seeing how this could have really, really long-term impact and benefit for our communities. So as I've been saying about this, as part of the 10%, you do it on the site, through landscaping, create new habitats, etc., etc. Please excuse me. Just something to think about here, thinking about climate resilience and, future proofing for our site, is if you're planting trees, for example, are they suitable for the changing climate? So, working with a arboriculturalist up here in my last job at Housing Association, we were starting to plant different trees when we were replanting, because actually the climate is changing. And, sadly, we're in that situation. So we were bringing trees, etc., that were probably more prevalent in the south coast, planting them up. So if you're thinking about doing this on site, think about the future. We've got a changing climate. Is what we're planting now the right thing for the next 30, 50, 100 years? Not quick wins. Oh, it's just chuck another fern in, or whatever it is. Let's make sure we're planting the right stuff that's going to stay there and is going to thrive going forward. So the BNG offsite, so I mentioned it briefly, but there's some really good resources out there. There's fantastic conservation charities, there's fantastic wildlife trusts. They're doing great stuff. So this is an opportunity to work with them and do great stuff with them, and support charities and support local, local organisations. And through that, they may also kind of link back to the local communities and bring the local communities on to look after those sites. So a lovely virtuous circle there, isn't it, of developing a site, putting some more green space in, making it better for the communities, engaging the communities, working with the communities to maintain that site, look after it, enhance it, keep it achieving, keep it live and achieving what it needs to do, which then goes back into giving local kind of supporting local charities, supporting people having nice places to live, potential employment, new skills, graduate training, all that sort of lovely workforce development type stuff. All kind of fits together with this. So if you're a local authority and you're going, we need to develop this site, we're going to use this for local biodiversity net gain, reach out to those charities, reach out to those organizations to see how you can work with them. There's fantastic stuff happening out there already, and let's see if we can develop it and grow it and kind of make it better. So here we go, and back to there. So the more distinctive the site, the more important the site, the more expensive it's going to be. It's fairly obvious. The government will then plough that money back into biodiversity projects. And this is just, this is when you're in a real situation where you can't do anything more. I think predominantly you will be doing the first two most of the time. So thinking about what does this mean for housing? So I'm going to talk through different kind of ideas for new developments, how you manage your land, your asset management systems and processes, and your journey to net zero. So we are all on a journey to net zero. We all need to achieve net zero, ideally before 2050. So how can this help us on that journey? So your biodiversity net gain for any new developments. So the 10% has to be part of the planning process. So as you're starting your thinking, you're kind of going, okay, I'm going to have to achieve this 10%. So is siting it somewhere better, one place better than another place? So thinking about where you're siting your development. So here's a development in Kendal. So thinking about where they're siting it in relation to other properties, and then in relation to the green space that's around the outside of those properties. So they're going into farmland here. So what's that going to do, and what impact's that going to have? So thinking about how that then impacts on the cost of these developments. If you are going to, worst case scenario, you're going to have to buy some biodiversity units off the government. It's all adding to the price. It's all making it a little bit more expensive, etc. And then if you've built your new homes, and you've got these fantastic new homes, and you kind of go as a development team, you might be going, fantastic. We'll hand them over and we'll tell them all about the sexy air source heat pumps and the solar panels and the etc, etc, etc. And we'll tell all the residents how to look after their homes and how to keep them warm and dry, etc, etc, etc. We have to be able to tell them what's happening in relation to your biodiversity net gain. What does that, the future managers of those sites, what do they have to do to maintain compliance with planning permission? If you don't maintain compliance with planning permission, guess what? You might have to, you might be in foul of planning, and all the consequences that will have. So having to go back to put planning again, having to retrospectively put in the 10% net gain again, etc, etc. So it's really important that we're passing on this information so that you're maintaining it and you've got no risk of falling foul of your biodiversity net gain. So lots and lots of things to think about as you're moving from developing. You've done it, you've done your 10% net gain, and then handing that on to the organisations that are managing those sites. There's a thing in here around land management. So this triangle that you can see marked on the map, this was a plot of land that the housing association I was working for was looking to sell. And I was kind of pushing back and going, this is too good an opportunity to sell this land because of the options it gives us for biodiversity net gain. It was in a town where we had potential to build new homes or do developments. There was a need for housing, etc. So what we could use this triangle of land for was that offsetting. So being able to offset to a different site for our biodiversity net gain. It wasn't a site we could build on, and it was very clear that we weren't going to build more houses there. It was a bit of a wet, boggy drain area, but it had potential. It had potential to do more biodiversity net gain. So we could have sold it 20, 30, 40 grand, whatever it was. And there was an organisation wanted to buy it, but actually we could then have been going, okay, well, we want to do a development, and suddenly, how do we do the biodiversity net gain? So it's add it into your options appraisals, thinking about, okay, is this plot of land a potential for offsetting other developments? And then within all of this, we've got to remember that plot of land is currently doing a piece of work for us in our carbon sequestration. So as we're thinking about our journey to net zero, what is that plot of land doing for us currently? Because if we lose that, then actually we're doing worse for our journey to net zero. And I'll come on to that in a second. And then it's thinking about asset management. It's that importance of maintaining compliance with biodiversity net gain for 30 years. So are we recording what is that plan in our asset management systems? How are we going to record that? How are we going to record which homes that's allocated to and which buildings that's allocated to? How are we going to, record what it is we have to do? What do we have to maintain? Because in 10 years' time, it'll be a different asset manager, it'll be a different, team, and they'll go in and go, oh, why are we paying X amount of money for that grounds maintenance contract? We can reduce that and not whatever we're doing to that plot of land. So we'll stop doing that to save money, but then actually you fall foul of your planning permission. Or the opposite, where actually you've kept an area of land that's away from grounds maintenance, and then your grounds maintenance team go in and mow it all and completely trash your wildfire meadow. So you've got to have that understanding. You've got to be able to kind of explain that for the future, and then make sure that people in 28, 28 years time will still understand why that plot of land is like it is, so that you're not doing something that's going to be detrimental to any sort of planning, etc. So real important there. That's, for me, was one of the key things that we need to ensure that we get our heads around. So your development team have handed it on to you. Where are you putting that information? How are you storing it? How are you going to make sure that you're not falling foul of it in 25 years time? And as I've said about journey to net zero, so hopefully people have a really basic understanding, hopefully some understanding of sort of scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. So these are our emissions that we put out, our carbon that we're putting out into the world. So right now I'm sitting here, I'm burning electricity, so that's my scope 2 emissions. The heating's on, and it's going out through the cavity walls or whatever. That's my my scope 1 emissions of my energy use, etc., etc. So we've got all these different emissions. But what we also do is we have sequestration. We've got green spaces sucking in trees. So just from my, if I take this down to a micro scale in my home, yes, I'm putting emissions out through electricity, through heating, through the food I buy, etc., etc. But I've also got plants and trees and flowers and etc. that my wife does. I am atrocious at gardening, so at no point am I saying that I'm responsible for any of that. And they're sucking the carbon in. So yes, I'm putting stuff out, but then I can also say my carbon footprint is being reduced slightly by the sequestration that happens within my control. So if you take that up to a much bigger scale, a housing association scale, you might have 10,000 tons of carbon being created by your operations. But the more green space you have, the more plants and trees and healthy biodiversity you are sucking carbon in. So you are reducing your carbon footprint by having that sequestration going on. So the more you can increase your sequestration, the more you are, dragging your carbon footprint to a lower number, to a smaller number. Because at some point you will need to be carbon neutral. Thankfully, that's in, statutory thing. Hopefully we're going to achieve it sooner than 2050, as I've said. But you need to increase your sequestration to do that, to offset your output. So the more we can do biodiversity on our sites, the more that we can have stuff going on, the more we will offset the carbon that we are creating to get us to that net zero. Otherwise, you're going to be, as an organization, you're going to be in a point where you have to buy carbon credits. You have to go out and go, all right, yeah, you're right. We still need to buy 10 tons worth of carbon credits because we're not achieving that. So hopefully, this is a long-term financial benefit as well, that organizationally you won't need to be buying carbon credits in the future. So just to summarize all this up, really, as we're thinking about all that we're doing, I'm going to advocate for you guys to think about an outdoor spaces management plan. Is creating yourself an outdoor spaces management plan. And within that, you can think about all these different elements. So thinking about your grounds maintenance contracts, thinking about your land management approach. What are you doing with it? Are you doing this for nature and people and etc.? Understanding your journey to net zero. So how is this going to support your journey to net zero? Tying it in with your asset management plans and your asset management strategies, and making sure that all biodiversity net gain plans for future developments is embedded in it. So by having this outdoor spaces management plan, you can ensure that you're communicating what you've done to future generations, but actually it's all tying together and kind of creating you this really nice kind of approach to your biodiversity net gain and your outdoor spaces. So not seeing it as a separate thing to your BNG. So hopefully that's been a really interesting journey through BNG for you. Hopefully it's given you some bit of insight and knowledge, etc. We have got some more detailed resources on our knowledge hub, so there's articles about this, so feel free to jump on that and have a read and see what else there is about biodiversity net gain. And I've also said the government website's got some really good readable information, and I'm really not very good reader, and I'm saying it's readable, so you've got to put hands up. Well done, government. You've done some great guidance there as well. So well worth a read. I can't be here without trying to sell other things. So, and something I think is really kind of important with this is thinking about our resident engagement. So there's a new resident engagement course we've developed that is CPD accredited. So if you're thinking around what we're doing for biodiversity, don't forget that you can engage your residents and your communities in this. because that's part of the way that you make it long term. It's also part of the way that you can kind of reduce the cost of this biodiversity net gain if you can get the community involved in looking after these sites. So, if you are interested in resident engagement and then thinking about actually then how can you do that for a bit of biodiversity net gain. So, yeah, bit of a quick sell on that. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. If there's any questions, I would just have a quick look in the chat, and Ben's going to launch the polls, word cloud, and all sorts of stuff like that. So yeah, I will let Ben do that, and I'll just have a quick read of the chat.